My name is Glenda Marshall, and I learned what betrayal really sounds like. It isn't a scream. It's quieter than that. It's your own father saying, "You don't live here anymore," while your brother stands beside him, laughing like it's nothing. I didn't argue. I just stood there, my hand still on the gate I built with them years ago, realizing that the people I trusted most had turned my silence into permission. I had spent years forgiving, excusing, and believing they'd change, because that's what family is supposed to do. But that morning, something in me finally broke the way they thought I never would. I stopped trying to be the one who understood, and decided to be the one who remembered. They had no idea that the quiet they took for weakness was the calm before I took everything back. The wheels touched down in San Diego just after sunrise. Warm air rolled in through the cracks of the plane door, carrying that familiar scent of salt and asphalt after rain. I should have felt home again. But instead, there was only a strange stillness pressing against my chest. In the taxi, I watched the city slide past, the old bookstore that had closed years ago, the narrow streets that always smelled of jasmine in summer. For a moment, I let myself picture the porch I remembered, the sound of a woman's voice calling me inside, paint stains on our hands, laughter tangled with the sound of waves. I held on to that memory like it might still be waiting for me. When the cab turned toward the coast, I saw the house. Two figures stood on the porch as if expecting me. My father, my brother. Both with the same look, detached, impatient. My father raised a beer to his lips, his eyes steady. My brother smirked, resting one hand on the rail I once sanded smooth. I stepped out, feeling the wind slice through the silence. No greeting, no warmth, just the hollow crash of the tide behind them. Inside, the air smelled of fresh paint and something colder. The walls were bare. My mother's photograph was gone. My brother brushed past, muttering that they'd needed the money, that our father had every right. I said nothing. Words would have been useless. I walked back to the porch, where the salt air hit hard and honest. He called it family sacrifice. I called it something else entirely. They hadn't just sold the house. They'd emptied the last place in the world that had still felt like mine. And standing there, I knew. This was the beginning of something they would never be able to undo. 3 months before everything unraveled, I was stationed in Okinawa, helping coordinate post-disaster relief after Typhoon Hagibis. Every evening, when the chaos settled and the generators hummed in the dark, I called home. My father's face would appear for a few seconds before he'd say he was busy, that we'd talk later. He never did. Hunter never picked up at all. One night, while the screen froze between flickers of weak Wi-Fi, I heard a woman's voice behind my father. Did she send the money yet? Then the call dropped. I sat there for a long time, staring at the black screen, telling myself it was nothing, that maybe he'd remarried, that maybe I was overthinking. But some part of me, trained to read what people hide, knew something was shifting. Weeks later, an email came through on a night so humid I could feel salt sticking to my skin. Property transfer initiated, pending verification. My heart stopped mid-beat. The house was registered solely in my name. Why would it be transferring? I wrote to my father, asking if something had happened with the mortgage. No answer. 2 days later, Hunter sent a text. "Everything's fine. Focus on your work." I reread that email until dawn. In the property records listed at the bottom, the contact address had been changed to a company name I'd never seen before, Reuben Slade Realty. By morning, suspicion had settled into something sharper. I went to the legal office on base and found Staff Sergeant Clark, an old friend now working for JAG. I explained everything I knew. He leaned back, studying me for a long moment before saying, "Trust is good. Oversight is better." He helped me file a formal request for verification and copies of every transaction tied to the property. 3 days later, the documents arrived in my inbox. Seller, Howard Marshall. Recipient, Hunter Marshall. Broker, Reuben Slade. I read the names until they blurred. My hand didn't shake, it just went numb. They hadn't only taken the house, they'd used my absence as permission. Somewhere between my duty and their decisions, my family had turned me into a signature they could spend. The small office on base smelled of paper and wet uniforms. Clark's computer cast a dull blue glow as he typed through federal databases. When he stopped, his jaw tightened. Slade's been under investigation before, he said. Nevada, 2 years ago. Fraud cases targeting veterans' homes. It might be part of a laundering ring. My throat closed. My father doesn't know. I managed. Clark looked up, voice steady but low. You sure about that? He turned the screen toward me. There it was. Silver Harbor Properties, a brokerage under Slade's name operating out of Las Vegas. The same city Hunter had vanished to the previous year when his debts caught up with him. I leaned back, the metal chair creaking. Memories of my father teaching me to fix window frames flashed through my mind, his voice telling me that a house was the one thing you could always trust, because it couldn't betray you. Now he'd proved even that was a lie. That night, I opened my duty journal and wrote one sentence. If truth no longer belongs to me at home, I'll drag it into the light myself. Clark broke the silence. When your rotation ends, go home quietly. Don't warn them. Gather everything in person. I nodded, eyes fixed on the dark horizon outside the window. The waves struck the concrete walls like a heartbeat. They think I'm just a soldier who follows orders. They forget I was trained to read deception. As the storm rolled in over Okinawa, lightning flashed across the sea. I packed my files and waited for the next flight out, knowing the real storm was waiting for me on the California coast. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving Okinawa. 12 hours in the air felt longer than any deployment I'd ever done. When the plane touched down in San Diego, I felt nothing, no relief, no warmth, just a heavy silence that clung to me all the way through customs. The drive toward the coast was quiet, except for the hum of the engine and the rush of wind slipping through the cracked window. That familiar scent of salt and eucalyptus filled the car. For a brief second, I wanted to believe everything would be fine once I turned onto my old street. But when the house appeared at the end of the road, something in my chest caved. It was different. The porch was painted beige instead of white. The flowers my mother planted were gone, replaced by perfectly trimmed shrubs. The fence had been rebuilt, taller, sharper, as if to keep me out. A strange car sat in the driveway, its metallic paint glinting under the overcast sky. I climbed the steps and knocked. A woman answered, mid-50s, composed but uneasy. Diane, she said. Diane Marshall, my father's wife. The word hit like a physical blow. He'd remarried, and I hadn't even known. She gestured toward the backyard. He's out there, with the new owner. The words blurred together. New owner. I followed the sound of conversation until I saw her, a young woman watering potted plants near the patio. She smiled uncertainly when she noticed me. Sophie Granger, she said, and told me she'd bought the house 3 weeks ago from my father. Inside, everything familiar had been stripped away. The walls were bare, my medals were gone, my mother's photographs replaced by generic art. Then came the sound of footsteps. My father walked in with a mug in hand, calm as if I'd come home for dinner. My brother stood behind him, that same crooked grin that always meant trouble. I asked what they'd done. My father shrugged, saying I'd given him permission with that old power of attorney. He'd just done what was necessary. Hunter grinned. We got a good price, he said. You should be grateful. I looked between them, then at Sophie, her confusion turning into fear. My father had sold my home, split the profit with Hunter, and used the law I'd trusted him with as a weapon against me. I turned to Sophie. Did you know this property was purchased with a VA loan? Her eyes widened. Your father said it was his. No, I said softly. Under federal law, no one can sell it without my signature. My father barked for me to stop. She's innocent, I said. You made her a victim, not me. The air thickened with salt and betrayal. I left before they could answer. In the rearview mirror, I saw Sophie frozen on the porch while my father and brother shouted at each other. The sky over the coast had turned iron gray. They thought I'd come home weak. They didn't know I was trained to regroup, not surrender. 2 days later, I went back. Sophie was waiting on the porch, clutching a mug that said, Mama needs coffee. She looked exhausted. Reuben said you agreed to the sale. She murmured. If I had, I said, I wouldn't still be wearing this uniform. My father stepped outside, face red, voice tight. She's causing trouble. I opened the folder in my hands and placed it on the porch table. This is the original VA loan document, under federal law. No one can sell or refinance a home while the service member is on active duty. And you knew that. I reminded you when I signed the papers. Hunter laughed. You've got money. Buy another place. I met his gaze, steady. How many times have I already paid your way out? Tuition, car repairs, gambling debt, and now my house? He smirked. Dad approved it. My father's voice cracked. You don't understand. Hunter was in real danger. Families help each other. Help or hide? I asked quietly. Sophie looked between us. Reuben told me your father refinanced the house before selling it. Once, maybe twice. I turned toward my father. When? He didn't answer. When? His voice was barely a whisper. 3 months ago. 3 months ago, the same week I sent money home. The realization hit like a gut punch. You mortgaged my service to clean up his mess. I said. My father's eyes dropped. I was trying to protect him. And you destroyed the only thing that still had my name on it. A gust of wind tore through the porch, snapping the flag in half. I caught the pole before it fell, the metal cutting cold into my palm. My hand stung, but the pain steadied me. This was no longer about walls or property. It was about honor. I turned to Sophie. You'll need an attorney. Don't talk to them again. She nodded, trembling. What will you do? Handle it the right way. I faced my father and brother one last time. You think I don't need this house, but this is where Mom taught me the difference between right and wrong. I'm taking that lesson with me, to court, if I have to. As I walked down the steps, Hunter yelled after me that I'd regret it. I didn't look back, not this time. I said to the wind. The flag flapped wildly above me, half torn but still standing, just like me. And as the ocean roared beyond the street, I knew this was only the beginning of a war they weren't prepared to fight. The sheriff's office in downtown San Diego smelled like old coffee, waxed floors, and ocean air sneaking through the blinds. The clerk behind the counter barely looked up when I said my name, but the words I added made him freeze. I'm reporting power of attorney abuse and VA loan fraud. A door opened, and Lieutenant Miguel Perez stepped out. I remembered him from a veterans ceremony years ago, a man who carried the calm of someone who'd seen too much. When he saw my name on the file, his face changed. They sold your VA property while you were deployed? He asked. Yes. And their family. Perez stared down at the papers, shaking his head. They used your name like currency. He ordered a copy of the bank records. 30 minutes later, he came back, eyes darker than before. 6 weeks ago, the money from the sale hit a joint account, Howard and Hunter Marshall, $48,000 wired out to a company in Las Vegas. Hunter used the money to pay gambling debts. My father let him, Perez said quietly. That's federal. We'll have to send this to the VA fraud division. Do it, I told him. I don't need their love anymore. I just need justice. That night, Clark called from Okinawa. He'd dug deeper into the broker, Reuben Slade. Slade wasn't just some realtor. He'd been under FBI watch for stealing veterans' properties through fake refinancing schemes. My father and brother had walked straight into a con. Or maybe they'd known exactly what they were doing. Standing by the shore, I replayed my father's words. Family sacrifices for each other. I whispered to the wind, sacrifice or sell out. The next morning, Perez called again. The notary who legalized the sale, Benson Hale, was an old friend of my father. He'd been warned before for falsifying signatures. The paperwork that sold my house wasn't valid. If we can prove it, Perez said, the sale disappears, and they face federal charges. Then let's prove it, I told him. They hadn't just stolen my house. They'd written my name into their crime, and I was going to take it back. My father called that night. His voice was rough, smaller than I remembered. He asked to meet at the old Pier Cafe. I agreed, not for him, but for closure. The cafe hadn't changed, salt in the air, yellow lights, a quiet country song looping in the background. He sat in the corner, eyes tired. I was wrong, he said. Hunter was in danger. I had to help him. You could have called me. I replied. I'd been sending money home. You've always had more, Glenda. I didn't want to bother you. You didn't bother me. You betrayed me. He said nothing. Then he confessed. He'd refinanced the house to cover Hunter's debts, then again to invest with Slade. He knew it was illegal. He'd done it anyway. Diane appeared suddenly, voice shaking. He's not telling her everything. He did it twice, once for debt, once for profit. My father froze. I looked at her. Thank you. I leaned closer to him. You taught me that honor can't be bought. You sold it anyway. Tears welled in his eyes. I only wanted to save my son. You destroyed both of us, I said, sliding a folder onto the table. Perez's investigation order. I walked out before he could answer. The wind outside was sharp and cold. My phone rang. Perez again. We've got a federal warrant. Slade's being taken in tomorrow. I hung up, staring out at the waves breaking against the pier. My father once said it was all for family. But family without honesty isn't love. It's a cage. And by morning, the lock was coming off. The morning broke gray and heavy with salt. When I reached the old house, 3 black SUVs were parked at the curb, engines running, lights cutting through the fog. Men stepped out in jackets marked Federal Bureau of Investigation, followed by agents from the VA Fraud Division. One turned to me. Staff Sergeant Glenda Marshall? I nodded. We'll need you here during the evidence seizure. My hands shook, not from fear but release. After months of silence, justice had arrived. Reuben Slade was pulled from his car first, cuffed before he could light his cigarette. He glanced at me. They said you were just a soldier, I answered. You should have read more carefully. Hunter stood pale beside my father, who wouldn't lift his head. The agent read his rights, charging him with VA fraud and abuse of federal authority. My father's voice cracked. He'd only tried to save his son. The agent said, Then you can explain it in court, when they were taken away. I stayed on the porch, tying the torn American flag with a strip from my old uniform. I couldn't save them. But I saved what mattered, my honor. They thought they could erase me with ink. I rewrote everything in law. 2 months later, I walked into the federal court of San Diego in a perfectly pressed uniform. The marble floors gleamed, echoing each step. On my right sat Sophie Granger, the buyer who never knew she'd been deceived. On my left, a lawyer from the VA Legal Division, ready to speak when I couldn't. Across the room, my father and Hunter sat at the defendant's table, both with heads bowed. Behind them, Diane held a small Bible against her chest, lips moving silently. When the judge asked what sentence I wanted to recommend, I rose, my voice steady. I'm not here to punish them. I'm here to prove that honor cannot be forged. I ask only for the property to be restored, for compensation to the innocent buyer, and for this violation to be recorded in truth. The courtroom fell silent. Sophie wiped her tears. My father's shoulders shook as he bowed lower. He stood slowly, his voice trembling. I did it because I thought my daughter was strong enough to bear it. I was wrong. No one is strong enough to be betrayed by their own blood. The judge's gavel fell. Transactions voided, property restored, restitution ordered. My father received community service at a veterans center. Hunter, 2 years probation. Slade, 10 years in federal prison. Outside. Perez shook my hand. Justice served. Sergeant. I smiled faintly. Justice learned. As I stepped into the sunlight, the flag above the courthouse rippled against a clear sky. I thought of the torn one I'd tied back together and felt the weight lift. They thought justice would destroy us. But maybe it's the only thing that can rebuild what we broke. 4 months after the court's verdict, I returned to the little house by the sea. The door still creaked the same way it always had. The porch gleamed with fresh paint, smelling faintly of salt and pine. In my pocket was a letter from Hunter, written from the rehab center. Maybe you were always the Marine. We just never learned how to stand our ground. I folded it carefully and tucked it inside my mother's old wooden box. The house had a new purpose now. I turned it into a shelter for homeless female veterans, the Haven Project. The first women arrived that week. I helped them set up bunks, hang curtains, repaint the living room. One young woman looked around and asked, "Is this your home?" I smiled. "No, it belongs to anyone who's ever lost their way back." One evening, my father came, holding a paint bucket. He didn't speak, just began repainting the fence. After a while, he said softly, "I can't earn back your trust, but I can start with a fence." I nodded, then start with the truth. As the sun fell, I raised a new flag, the one Perez gave me, engraved for the one who rebuilt. They sold my house thinking I'd break, but I rebuilt something they'll never own, my peace,